Do you think it's honor that's keeping the peace? It's fear. Fear and blood.
When I'm queen, I will create a new order.
We are back with the Unmitigated Gall podcast. We've got the nerve, the audacity, the Unmitigated Gall to try to compare House of the Dragon to Game of Thrones. Does it stand a chance in this battle?
So what's this podcast about?
Somebody got to keep it real, you know.
Reclaiming my time by winning.
Keep my wife's name.
Catch me outside, how about that?
You're talking to
Unabashed hater.
my style is impetuous.
King Kong ain't got.
You come in with some nice waves of the black screen.
You're average looking at best.
I took offense to that.
Robert.
You ain't got the answer, Sway.
I have you beat.
You now have the Unmitigated Gall.
Here to discuss Omaha's finest rapper extraordinaire, Pop G. We're gonna talk.
Yes, sir.
We're gonna talk about this series, and we're gonna talk about his album, which is The Microphone Massacre, available now on your streaming services. So stick around for that. We're gonna hear about his music. We're gonna hear some bars, and we're gonna talk about the future of Midwest rap. But right now, we gotta talk about, as black folks call, House of Dragons.
Yes, sir.
The proper name, House of the Dragon, but you know, House of Dragons.
House of Dragons, that's what everybody call it.
So before, what I want to do, because you know, both of these series, Game of Thrones and House of Dragons, they got so many characters. It's gonna be so massive by the time it's done. I was like, let me simplify this. What made it great? And the story, I feel like, is gonna be, the plot line is gonna be great. So let's break it down into characters and the show that is being put together by the people involved. So before I get your initial impression, I'm just going to tell the folks what we're going to do. I'm going to give my top 10 from each season. Season 1 of Game of Thrones, top 10 characters. Season 1, which is the only one we have, A House of Dragons, top 10 characters. We're going to see how they measure up, and then we'll talk about just how each of those seasons have gone, and, you know, kind of look forward. But first, Pop G, your initial impression of House of the Dragon.
Initial impression of House of the Dragon. I loved it. I loved everything about it. It was, I'd say, in comparison to Game of Thrones first season, I liked Game of Thrones first season better. There was a lot going on, a lot of little stories here and there, a lot of action, a lot of nudity too. So
Which like, I missed that in this.
There wasn't as much nudity in House of the Dragon, but that's cool. I feel like the action still stacked up. I feel like they still have the moments to like shock you, like, whoa,
yeah,
all right, I knew something was coming. I didn't expect that.
Right.
I like the storyline. I'm interested to see which way it's gonna go. It was when it first started, I was like, all right, this is cool. I felt like Game of Thrones probably had more to capture you when it first started. However, towards the end of House of Dragon, I feel like I'm probably on the edge of my seat more. I'm interested to see what happens next in the season 2, just from the last episode on how things ended on House of the Dragon.
Right. And so let's talk about those, because largely I agree with you. So I agree, of course, Game of Thrones was a better series, in my opinion, because of the scale of Game of Thrones and the story is arguably the best, if you can even call it a TV series of all time.
Yeah, it's dope.
So, and of course, on House of Dragons, you notice less violent, less nudity and sex. Right. And I think that was because they made a conscious effort to do that. They brought in more female directors this time. So they kind of dialed back a lot of the violent sex scenes. But to push back on that, this is kind of a medieval fantasy. And so if you put women in medieval times, what do you think is happening to them? It's violence.
Right. Yeah, it's super violent. They got to be, we'll see. That's why I like characters like Cersei from she's probably like the top of my list.
Right.
'Cause everything, nothing happens. It don't spin without Cersei's cunning,
Right.
dude. Like, she really makes the story in all like the seasons.
Right.
To me, anyways.
Nah, so
She's
let's
crafty.
do that. So here are the top 10 characters from each cast, season 1, and this is mine. This is not scientific, but these are basically characters that I feel are most compelling and make you want to watch. Keep the story moving.
You understand why I did it?
He was a deserter.
The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword.
So in Game of Thrones, Eddard, Ned Stark, Lord Eddard Stark, because I feel like, we were all shocked when his head got chopped off at the end of season 1.
Yeah, man.
Because we were under the impression
My favorite character.
he was like the focal point of the story. We didn't realize until later that Jon Snow is the focus of the story, which is why I don't have Jon Snow in my top 10 list for season 1. But Eddard, Ned Stark, he set the tone. You knew by him what the culture of the North was. You knew what the Stark stood for, and you knew, and his death set up, how his children were gonna be all eventually making their way back together. So he didn't have the most personality, but like his gravity as a character was so big. So Ned
He was like a noble king.
just a noble dude.
noble man.
The world
Yeah.
needs more Ned Starks, man.
Right.
So Ned Stark, Tyrion Lannister, just an amazing character played by an amazing actor, just like full of jokes and cunning, just like this dude will not lose.
He had to be smart because of how they treated him
Yeah,
for being
a dwarf.
What a dwarf? I was about to say, what do they call it back then? A dwarf,
Right.
yeah, yeah. So that's kind of I feel like he's probably in everybody's favorite though. You know what I mean? He's like one of those favorite characters, like one of those star characters. He had a lot to overcome
Right.
in the first season. Well, he didn't get that scar in the first season though, did he?
No, but I mean, just staying alive,
that
you know what I
yet.
mean? Just staying alive. So Tyrion, Cersei, your girl, and Jaime Lannister. So the Lannisters, I mean,
Right.
three,
Right.
and Joffrey, was a Baratheon, but was really a Lannister.
Lannister, right? That's what Ned died over,
Right.
Because he figured it out,
He was like,
and he told Cersei that he was gonna expose the truth.
it's like some
And Cersei
Baratheon
was like-
of brown hair, some brown hair, brown Joffrey, golden hair. It's like, hold on, this brown hair should dominate golden hair.
Yeah, it felt like from that it was gonna be a battle between those two families, the Starks and the Lannisters, off the bat, because Bran he saw Cersei and Jaime going at it, and he's like, wait a minute,
Right. But now the next name on my list is going to show you how strong season 1 was. Only in season 1, Khal Drogo
Yes,
made a whole career off of not even every episode in season 1.
Right. Yeah, he was powerful.
Yeah, and of course
Yeah.
the queen, the mother of dragons, Daenerys Targaryen, who at that point was a girl getting raped by Khal Drogo.
Yeah, unfortunately, right? Like, yeah, man, it was raw. Well, that's the thing, though. I feel like they gave you a complete, unfiltered, raw look of medieval times.
Right.
Like this stuff that was happening, like the incest, rape, the people getting slaughtered, set up behind their backs, and also
It's like this is
illegitimate
basically how politics
heirs.
was played back then.
Right, like illegitimate heirs to the throne, bastard sons, bastard children. Like there's a whole lot of, it's just a big mess, and there's people trying to play by the book, and then there's people doing stuff just to get an advantage to stay in power. Man,
And speaking of that, Daenerys' brother, who we usually forget about, Viserys Targaryen. Viserys is a name that we see again in House of Dragons, but her
right.
brother was a very unlikable character. I'm sure everybody was happy when he died with that little melted golden crown that Khal Drogo put on him.
Yo, yeah, man. Everybody forget about him. Well, so the Targaryens recycle names, and I feel like does everybody recycle names in that time?
I don't know if everyone does, but definitely the Targaryens do. They definitely feel like their shit don't stink, and like they're a little more regal. Like, think about it. Incest common for them just because they believe like their blood is numero uno.
Right.
So
they have to keep it going.
So yeah,
they're superior. They rule with dragons.
Exactly.
You gotta fear this name.
And then a couple other names on my top 10 list from Game of Thrones season 1: Lady Catelyn, and then the Hound. You didn't figure out how dope the Mountain was until later. But the Hound, away, you knew the Hound was a force to be reckoned with. And you saw multiple sides of him because you saw he was a brute who would kill a kid if he was ordered to. But then he also looked out for the Stark girls once everything started going to hell. He got him up out of there.
Yeah, he was dope. He was really, really dope. Now that makes me think of, is that the end of your list, or are you still?
Yeah, that's my top 10 for the Game of Thrones season 1.
All right.
Now, I left off King Robert Baratheon because, he was the king, but he wasn't a character that made you come back week to week. And Jon Snow, like I said, he was getting on people's radar, but only the people who read the books knew he was that important in season 1. So if I'm just comparing season 1 of House of Dragons to season 1 of Game of Thrones, those are my top 10 characters, and really, that's a strong lineup. Those characters were like...
That is.
So I'm going to tell you right now, the House of the Dragon top 10 characters do not stack up to the Game of Thrones characters.
No, you're right. They really don't. Let me see. I think I only have... Let me see. Because I agree with that list for the most part. The only person I want to add is Sir Peter Baelish, Littlefinger.
Littlefinger. All right, so who do you lose? Maybe you lose Lady Catelyn, maybe, or...
Yeah, I would take her off, and then... Yeah, because I wouldn't really put Arya Stark on this list yet.
Nah, all the kids kind of came around later.
I wouldn't put Robb on the list either. Not yet, Robb Stark.
Nope.
Not yet.
Yeah,
that's really the only one that I would really add is Littlefinger, because he was, sticking to the shadows, knew everything, but he was so deceptive. Like, it seemed like he was playing both sides.
Were you talking about Littlefinger in season 1? Like, was he?
I was.
Okay.
I was, because it's like, it was to that point to where it's like, dude, you know the truth.
Right.
Like, you're supposed to have Ned's back,
right.
And you didn't know the type of character he was.
And
then when you figured out he didn't have Ned's back, and you like, bro, what are you doing?
But remember, because he loved Lady Catelyn and wanted her to himself.
Right. And so that's why I thought he would kind of ride for the Starks, but in hindsight, he wanted Ned out the way.
Right.
So he played his position. Ned got beheaded, and then Joffrey was a menace. That's the only person I would add is Littlefinger, because to me, Littlefinger was like he played an important role.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm like, it might have went another way depending on him. Maybe, I'm not sure, but I think he could have changed some things maybe.
So check out my House of the Dragon top 10, and I think you might disagree with this because I know that a lot of the kids probably made your list. But these are the characters that I felt like drove it, that had people talking, that had people making memes. These are the can't miss characters from House of the Dragon season 1.
And I placed my heir upon the Iron Throne, and all the dragons roared as one.
Of course, King Viserys, crumbling, rotten self. I mean, just watching this fool get yellow and stuff falling off of him every week,
just breaking apart, breaking away.
And how big of a simp he was. He was just like, just emotionally, just like, dog, you're a king. You can't just be trying to make everyone feel good. Like you've got to make some
But he
tough
did
decisions.
go against the grain. He did go against the grain, naming his daughter as the heir.
Right, Rhaenyra Targaryen. So of course,
there we go.
she's on my top 10 list just because she's like the central character in all this. I will say I was feeling the young Rhaenyra, the actress that played the young Rhaenyra more than the adult one. The adult Rhaenyra was kind of boring.
Yeah, see, the young Rhaenyra, she was fire.
Right.
She was she just ain't give a damn about nothing.
Right. Like she was smart, but she was mischievous. She had heart.
Right,
but
exactly.
she also was ambitious. Like you could feel all that happening.
Right. All the different pulls, you know what I mean? She's like, am I gonna ride for Allison?
Right.
You know what I mean? My best friend.
Right.
Or like, what's it gonna be? Because now, Allison her and Allison got beef now. You know what I mean?
Right. Of course, Allison's on my list. But we can't forget Prince Daemon. It's like, because you start off thinking like, man, this dude is trouble. But then you end up saying, you realize, hey, this dude just wants to smoke. But you start loving Prince Daemon after a while. You
do. Daemon is... They wanted you to hate him. I felt like he was kind of similar to Jaime Lannister because at first they wanted you to hate Jaime Lannister, like, oh, despise this man.
Right.
And then as the seasons of Game of Thrones went on, they wanted you to have sympathy for Jaime Lannister.
Right.
He gets his hand cut off. He's held captive.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, look at all the stuff he's going through. You know what I mean? So they gave you that sympathy for him. So I felt like it was kind of like similar to that because at first they wanted us to hate him. Like, man, look at this dude. He's so smug.
Right.
He thinks he's walking around like he's the head dude in charge. And, he's going to battle and he rushes into battle because he doesn't want his brother's help. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's like, how arrogant can you be? But then as it goes on, you're like, oh, this dude is a soldier.
Right. When he rushes into that cave and comes out with that that pirate dude's head. No, his whole torso.
The crustacean.
Right.
The Crab King.
The Crab King.
I don't know, it's something like that, right?
Yeah. So
yeah, he came out with his arm and his head like severed and held it up. And it's like, dang, that was a dope moment.
Right.
Like they showed you firsthand, like this dude just won a war, a battle.
All because he didn't want Viserys' help. So
right.
Of course they're on my top 10 list. Viserys, Daemon, Rhaenyra. You said Alicent because it's the most flip-flopping. Oh, I want power. Oh, I want to be nice. Oh, I'm ambitious. I don't know if this is right.
But then somebody died. She's like, I didn't want this.
I didn't want this. Like, how do you think this is played?
How you want to play this? Like, this is all because of you. I hear people comparing her to Cersei, but I still don't think she's as smart as Cersei.
Cersei knew what she wanted.
Everybody. Cersei, yeah, she wanted to protect her children, keep her children in power. She went after it. She didn't care who was in her way. And she was just super smart. You know what I mean?
I feel like Alicent's like a Karen, like evil, but trying to act like she's a victim. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you got to be one or the other. You got to be a villain or a hero. Don't be flip-flopping.
That's the best metaphor for her. She's definitely a Karen. 'Cause like, come on now. Like, look at the stuff you're doing. You can't play the victim after you done caused all this mess and death and brutality. Like, come on now.
So speaking of women, we've also got Princess Rhaenys, who she would have been the leader of the kingdom, but it's a male-dominated society, so it went to Viserys, who Viserys ended up giving it to his daughter. So Rhaenys has a lot of mixed feelings, and she's probably the most sympathetic character as a whole.
She's the most humane.
Right.
She has humility because you saw how she broke out with her dragon. She could have burned all of them.
She could have ended the whole series right there. She could have, and really, in my opinion, she should have. Like, if you ask me, it's crazy because this is kind of billed as a more pro woman series and how it's being produced and created. But these central characters, the women in there, you could argue that they're it's a critique of female leadership because Rhaenyra's not a fit leader. Alicent is a Karen, and you got Rhaenys given the opportunity to be strong and kind of right the wrong. She, kind of takes the high road. So it's like, well, damn, do you want a woman leader or not?
Well, Rhaenys is probably the most logical, because I feel like, I feel like Alicent moves purely off of emotions,
right?
And I feel like that makes her not be that. Because of that, she's not as strategic as she thinks she is. You know what I mean? I feel like Rhaenyra sometimes is logical, but then gets emotional and she'll make a impulsive decision, or she'll do something impulsive, and then she goes back to logic. But Rhaenys, I feel like, was the most logical, because she was saying that if there was a war being started, she didn't want it to be on her behalf.
Right.
Is why she didn't burn them.
Right.
Right. And then if you go back to, the women leadership, you go back to Rhaenyra talking about it, she's like, I feel like she kind of respected that, because she's like, if I wanted to roll up with my dragons and burn all of them, I'd be ruling over fire and bone, and I don't want to have a kingdom and like that.
Which to me is naive. Which it's gonna be bloodshed one way or another. So you're either gonna have millions of soldiers and townspeople being killed, or you can use your dragons to wipe these fools out real quick. So I feel like they're trying to act like, oh, I don't want to do it, but in a way, you're kind of setting into motion a chain of events where thousands and maybe even millions of people are gonna die. So anyway, so you got your boy Aemon, Eye Patch Targaryen, arguably one of the illest young characters, in the Game of Thrones canon.
The medieval Slick Rick, if you will.
Yep. Someone who I know you're gonna love, Lord Corlys Velaryon, who's with the locks like you. You know what I mean?
What's funny is I saw him and I was like, could I pull that off? Could I die? Could I have white locks?
Dog, I'm not. That would be super ill. I'm just gonna say it'd be super ill.
No, he was dope too. He was dope too. I didn't like how he was missing though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Through part of it, you know what I mean? But he was dope. I loved him. I loved all of his interactions.
And his brother made my list simply because of the way he died.
He went out.
Vaemon Velaryon. Basically, he spoke the truth, and he spoke it loud and proud, and he got his head chopped in half. So just that whole scene was just so ill,
That was such a fire scene, man, because he's like, I'm not about to bite my tongue. I'm going to stand on principle for the Valyrian name, right?
Right.
And so even though he knew he, was crossing the line, he just wanted to let it be known. Dang, man, it was such a bold statement. He called them bastards right to everybody's face.
Snap.
Right to everybody's face, you know what I mean? And it's like, dang, man, this dude is bold. I honestly knew something was gonna happen.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to be his head getting cut in half like that.
I know, that was dope. I mean, I think what Vaemon does for a lot of us is he kind of fulfills this fantasy that we all have, that there's someone in maybe our family or at work who will just kind of breach protocol and just speak the unspeakable truth in front of everybody. And so he does that. He has that fantasy and a reminder of what would really happen. He got killed, whether it's, so if we did something like that, our career would be killed or our family relationships would be killed.
He went out,
but
he went out on his shield, is what some would say.
Yeah.
He stood on his principles, stood on his ground. Well, see, I'm interested because it's that's why I'm interested on what's going to happen next, because Corlys, when he heard about that, he seemed like, of course, your brother died. You're going to be shooken up. You know what I mean? But he seemed like he didn't know who he wanted to support.
Right. He was kind of like, what, bruh?
So I feel like, that there's so much potential on what role he could play in the next season because of that.
Yeah.
So important to me.
So we mentioned Alicent Hightower. Her father, Otto Hightower, is on my list. Arguably one of to me, my favorite character, because a lot of people was talking about how they hated Otto and he's a villain. But what I like about him is where he stands. He's coming for the power. He doesn't like his daughter being a Karen about it. Just like, grow up. This is the game that we're playing. If you follow me, I'm trying to show you how to win it. And he's very just methodically pushing forward.
Right.
And, I feel like he's logical. He's like, look, we live in a time where women don't take the throne. I know this, so if that's not the case, why not put your son on the throne? It's obvious.
Right.
So I love that he's like in a very diplomatic, not even diplomatic, but in an old-timey way saying, this is the way it is.
He even like thought about all that beforehand. It was the reason why Viserys chose Alicent in the first place, right? Because he was trying to make decisions on who he was going to marry. Right, and try to continue his name, his legacy. And so I feel like he got swayed because he was the hand of the king.
Right. In many ways, Otto Hightower reminds me of Tywin Lannister, the patriarch of the Lannister family.
Dude, I can see that so clearly now that you say that.
Like, this is the deal. It's about power. Some blood will get shed. I'm going to get mine. And, like, nothing you can tell. The kids, he's not letting his feelings towards his kids, like, get in the way of that. He's like, this is the goal. This is how it's done.
Yeah, very, very stern. And he had the wisdom, though, and the knowledge. And he was trying to, I feel like he was trying to play chess while everybody else is playing checkers.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, everybody was moving off of emotions and pride, and they're like, but we should do things this way. And he's like, this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And y'all going to like it.
Right. Now, Pop, the last person on my list, it was kind of hard to decide between these. So, number 10, I'm going to let you decide. I had Larys Strong, the dude with the club foot who, who loves Lady Alicent's feet, or Sir Criston Cole,
Cole, I knew it, man. I don't know, dude. That's so hard.
I feel like it's Sir Criston Cole because,
I want to say Sir Criston Cole too because, like, I feel like a lot of events happen because of him.
Right.
You know what I mean?
The shotgun wedding.
Emotional wreck. Yeah, he becomes an emotional wreck after Rhaenyra like shoots him down, right? To him, he was shot down. And so he's like, forget this, man. I'm just about to I want to hurt something.
Right.
Right. And so then the wedding happens, and you could feel, if you watched Game of Thrones, I told Charmaine, I was like, this is like a red wedding moment. Like, you could feel the anticipation building up. Like, somebody's gonna die, something's gonna happen. There's too much tension. You could feel it through the screen. So I'm like, to me, that was like one of the big moments. That in the very last episode of House of Dragon was one of the big moments that I was like, okay, job well done.
So it sounds like we're in agreement that although we both love House of the Dragon, at this point it's not holding a candle to Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. Not yet, anyway.
Not yet.
There was just too much going on in Game of Thrones first season, man.
Right. The storyline, the characters, the sex and violence in Game of Thrones. And you gotta say, so why is this? And I think a lot of it has to do with the different showrunners. So David Benioff and Dan Weiss were the showrunners for Game of Thrones. Miguel Sapochnik, I don't know how to say his last name, but there's two guys that were showrunners for House of the Dragons. One of them, Miguel, he directed some Game of Thrones episodes. He actually stepped aside and let Ryan Condal handle it. So different showrunners, which is a big reason for why the different feel of this season. So you got to say, both still off to... Well, House of Dragons still off to a good start, but for me, it's still Game of Thrones unless, some amazing things start happening in season 2.
See, man, I like Alicent, man, but I would probably take her off the list. Even though like she does play like a lot of key moments. She's gonna be like everybody's talking about her. I like well, actually no, you already said you excuse me. You already had Aemon in there, didn't you?
Yeah, Aemon Targaryen. I didn't put his brother because I feel like at this point, season 1, his brother really wasn't. They could have done a better job of making him a more interesting character.
Yeah, you're right. I'm trying to see, man. I'm like, shoot, there's got to be somebody you missing out on, but I think you probably hit the nail on the head for House of Dragon, man.
Right. Like all the kids, I feel like just like with Game of Thrones, I feel like the kids are going to kind of step up as the seasons go on.
Right.
But right now, it's like the elders.
With Luke Lucerius getting eaten up, man, his brother Jace is probably gonna be like feeling some type of way. That, and I mean, I'm curious to see how Daemon responds to all this. Did you peep that part where like he's running like the strategies on the little map, saying we could do this, take this area, do that, do this. I've been in battle. This is my experience. This is what we should do. And he's like kind of he's overshadowing Rhaenyra. And so it's like, I'm going to support you. You want to rule. You want to be the queen. But let me do my job. This is what I know.
Right.
Let me handle this. So I'm curious to see how he is going to respond in the next season. Because it's like how they ended that.
Mm-hmm.
With Luke getting eaten up like that, it's like, dang, boy. This is about to start a chain of events. Hey,
little ass dragon.
You just declared war. I thought that he was going to get away. I'm like, nah, the other dragon.
I put on Rhaenyra. She was very naive about
she was
her
like
connections and starting off and like how these lords operate when she's not around. Like, these lords, they didn't get rich by, not looking out for themselves.
Right. Well, see, here's the thing about Alicent, right? So, even though, like I said, she doesn't have the cunning like Cersei, she's not as knowledgeable, she's not as tricky and has that tricky mastery that Cersei has, Otto does. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, it's like, there was a point, what happened? Somebody had died, right? And she's like, oh, this is my fault. And Otto's like, no. I didn't think you had it in you to win this game. And now I know you do.
Right.
We got a lot to discuss. We about to get to it. So I feel like she might become what we see Cersei as in Game of Thrones. You know what I mean? All under his tutelage, of course, because Otto sees everything. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm gonna play this game to my advantage.
Right.
And we're gonna stay in royalty. Like, we about to win this war, we about to do what we need to do.
So to button this up, if Game of Thrones is a 10 out of 10, what is House of Dragons?
All right, so I would give it an 8 out of 10 for House of Dragons, because even though it's not as action-packed, there's not as much with the storyline, with like multiple different storylines and different characters going on like there was in Game of Thrones. It's not as much of a mystery. You see the White Walker, the first episode of Game of Thrones, so there's literally a lot going on in Game of Thrones, but I'm going to give Game of Thrones a 10 out of 10. I don't usually give out 10 out of 10s like that. I'm really strict on that. So I would say House of Dragon, 8 out of 10, just from how it ended, and I know how they're going to go, how they're going to proceed. So for that first season, knowing how I was left on the edge of my seat like that, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Probably would have gave it a 7, but that last episode
strong.
It made the whole difference for me. It's like, wow, like there's a lot going to happen.
Right.
There's a lot going to happen. So 8 out of 10. What you giving it?
Pop G, I agree with you. 8 out of 10. Right, for those same reasons. So there you have it. In a battle of Game of Thrones Season 1, House of Dragons Season 1, Game of Thrones still reigns supreme, but House of Dragons still not to be messed with. So listen, we're about to talk rap, the art of rap.
Yes,
the microphone massacre. So stick with us, Pop G. We get to focus on this man next.